Welcome back to our series on Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem In Memoriam. We are right now in the midst of the pandemic crisis still, and we are at this point in the poem in very deep waters. This is a subsequence of cantos that deal with with Tennyson's imagination regarding the ship that bears the body of his friend Arthur Hallam back to England to be buried. We've seen in the last few cantos that there is this concern to understand the role of poetic fancy, poetic conceit in dealing with grief. And it is an exploration that would be very helpful for us as we deal with our own grief in this time. Canto 13. Tears of the widower when he sees a late lost form that sleep reveals, and moves his doubtful arms, and feels her place is empty, fall like these, which weep a loss forever new, a void where heart on heart reposed, and where warm hands have pressed and closed silence till I be silent too, which weep the comrade of my choice, an awful thought, a life removed, the human-hearted man I loved, a spirit, not a breathing voice. Come time and teach me many years, I do not suffer in a dream. For now so strange do these things seem, mine eyes have leisure for their tears. My fancy's time to rise on wing and glance about the approaching sails, as though they brought but merchants' bales, and not the burthen that they bring. So the difficulties are especially concentrated in the first two stanzas, which I've reproduced on the board here. Tears of the widower who dreams that he's seen his lost wife, but finds after checking that she is in fact not there. Tears of the widower, separated by that long break, takes the verb here at the end of the stanza. Tears of the widower fall like these. Like these what? The tears that Tennyson himself sheds, or something else. That's what we have to figure out. Tears of the widower fall like these, semicolon. That's what's here. Which weep a loss. So these tears weep a loss forever new. So that's very poignant. A loss forever new. Very, very poignant. A void where heart on heart repose. So it seems like these tears weep a loss forever new, a void, so that's an appositional phrase, weep a loss, weep a void where heart on heart reposed. Another semicolon. So we seem to have a series. Tears of the widower fall like these. If weeping a loss, a void, and then this third thing were parallel, you wouldn't have a semicolon here. So that's going to be a tricky thing. So we have weep a loss, weep a void, and where warm hands have pressed and closed, silence, till I be silent too. Now that's not parallel. And the semicolon, so grammatically, we've got a break as far as the semicolon, and then the structure itself just doesn't bear up, that we don't have weep a loss, weep a void, weep silence. We have something like a series which doesn't quite make sense. Tears of the widower fall like these. Tears, kind of making that tears, which weep a loss, a void. And then we have a third thing, silence. So I think what Tennyson is doing is related to what we've seen in the previous cantos. It is, I think, that what Tennyson is telling us is that he's looking at the scene that his poetic fancy is conjuring up, right? He's the one who's come up with this analogy to a widower who's lost his wife. So he's looking at the scene of a man dreaming because he's conjured it up. I think this is a matter of an objectivity in which Tennyson is floating above his own art. So he's looking at the scene. The tears of the widower fall like these. They could be like Tennyson's own tears. Probably that's implied, but also they fall like this. Like themselves. He's watching it like a movie, right? He's watching this poetic construction that he's responsible for, this widower who's lost his wife and thought that she was there, but in fact she is gone. he's starting to cry again, this widower. So he's seeing the tears fall the way they're falling. They're weeping a loss, they're weeping a void, and then there's this, what is silence in this? It's not a series. It's he's imagining this scene, so it's not full of life sounds. It's his own imagination. So he's watching this silent scene in his mind, and he's becoming silent too. So I think Tennyson is doing this very self-conscious exploration of his poetic conceits, the power of his imagination, and what it's doing to cope with the loss of his friend. The next sentence just starts up, and it's not really an independent sentence. Which weep the comrade of my choice. Now it's his tears, weeping the comrade of my choice. An awful thought. Now that's not it's not our colloquial sense of that's not good. It's awful, filled with awe. This awe-filled thought of a life removed, the human-hearted man I loved. A spirit, capital S spirit, which is interesting given my claim as far as Canto 12 with the resonances from the book of Revelation. But in any case, a spirit, not a breathing voice. And again, that's one of those compact gems that Tennyson is capable of. He wants, breath indicates lungs, there's a body, but Hallam is dead, so he may be a spirit somewhere, but he's not a breathing voice that you can hear that could break the silence of this interior reverie that Tennyson is stuck with instead of the friend that he wants. And then he apostrophizes time here. He's not talking to the ship as he has been in the subsequence of poems on the ship that bears Arthur's body to England. Come time and teach me many years, during many years, through the years that I'm going to face without my friend. Teach me that I do not suffer in a dream. He's so worried that his own poetic ability to deal with metaphors, to construct these worlds of a ship sailing through the ocean through calm weather, the metaphors that he's conjuring, the similes that he's conjuring already that we've seen so many of in this poem so far, in these previous cantos. He's saying, look, teach me time. Remember at the end of Canto 12, he had to come back into time. As the years go on, he wrote these poems right after the death. As the years go on, teach me that I'm not just stuck in a dream, that this is real. I want to face the reality of the thing. So what he's struggling with is how to process the unreal fact, the unreal reality of the loss of his dearest love, this immense friendship that draws on the deepest parts of his personality. So he doesn't want his poetic fancy to be untrue to that unreal reality. For now so strange do these things seem, the grief that he's feeling, mine eyes have leisure for their tears. He's saying there's something deeper than playing the role of a mourner. We do this. When we've lost something, we can easily slip into roles, and that's necessary, right? You lose someone to death. There are all kinds of busy things you've got to go through. You've got to plan the funeral. You've got to plan the wake. You've got to go through the motions, write the obituary. And part of that is playing the role of someone. I mean, you're truly mourning, but you also have to play the role of someone truly mourning. And so you cry. He's talking about something that he knows, even though he's writing this set of poems right after the death. He knows he's never going to recover from this, really. His whole life is going to be marked by this loss. And so he wants to access somehow something deeper even than the tears that are real, of course, these tears that are falling. The reality of losing his reality. Something deeper than tears, something deeper than any sentimentality, something deeper than poetic, deeper than poetic fancy that's serving conventional response. My fancy's time to rise on wing. It's an immensely complex line referring clearly again, this subsequence of poems on the ship the sequence is so connected in a way that we hadn't seen in the previous cantos before the subsequence. Referring to Canto 12, my fancy's time to rise on wings. So the dove that had cried woe in the previous canto, now the time that he's addressed, now his fancies are going to try to, of course it means the fancies like a flock of doves, time to rise on wing. It's like they plan to take flight at the opportune moment, as if to co-opt what time must in fact teach Tennyson about grief. My fancy's time to rise on wing and glance about the approaching sail. So going back to this, the root metaphor of the root fancy of sending Tennyson sending his imagination to the ship and making sure that the ship has calm weather to come to England in. As though they brought, but now he sees, so I'm sending my dove-like fancies to that ship, and they're circling around as though they brought but merchants' bales and not the burthen that they bring. Burthen is an older form of the word burden, very resonant word. It can mean, of course, the cargo of a ship, a weight, of course, but also the argument that say even a poem is making. So he's saying that I want you to teach me how to live in the fullness of my grief, deeper than sentimental tears, deeper than whatever my fancies might do to protect me as a coping mechanism. Because that coping mechanism will tend to shallow out what I've lost. Well, and that's part of the point. It makes you cope by, it allows you to cope by shallowing out, making more conventional, making more bearable the burden. And so he just doesn't want to get lost in that. It's a very dreamlike canto, and Tennyson grapples with ambiguity as well as anybody does. Let's go to Canto 14. One note about this canto, it is a bravura performance. It is one single sentence. If one should bring me this report that thou hadst touched the land today, and I went down into the quay and found thee lying in the port, and standing muffled round with woe, should see thy passengers in rank come stepping lightly down the plank and beckoning unto those they know, and if along with these should come the man I held as half divine, should strike a sudden hand in mind and ask 1,000 things of home, and I should tell him all my pain and how my life had drooped of late, and he should sorrow o'er my state and marvel what possessed my brain, and I perceived no touch of change, no hint of death in all his frame, but found him all in all the same, I should not feel it to be strange. A note on pronunciation, that word Q-U-A-Y, we pronounce key, but under pressure of the spelling, presumably, it does have a possible pronunciation of quay, and that does seem to be what Tennyson had in mind. It means a dock. This is a gut punch. It's straightforward, but awesome and awful. Now he is that widower who's imagining his loved one back, and he's going to have to deal with the rude awakening of that not being the case. But he's also saying, in Canto 13, poetic fancy is dealing with the fact that everything is so strange that he's lost his dearest friend. And that now I should not feel it strange to have my friend back. And isn't that exactly what we deal with? We're dealing with in this global crisis. But every time we lose a love to death, or you've got a romantic relationship that ends for whatever reason, or someone you've loved as a friend, as a family member, that bond has been broken, again, for whatever reason. If one is facing it squarely, it's going to feel strange. So that's not exactly shallow to feel it, how surreal it is, how surreal that all my world should go away. It is surreal. But there's a betrayal in that if one takes that feeling of it's all being surreal and allows it to have the last word, as if in fact that love isn't the most real thing. I think that's the paradox that we're being confronted with by Tennyson, that love, one's first love, deepest love, that's what is real. And yes, when we lose that love for whatever reason, we feel the surreality, the absurdity of it. But let us not get lost in that. What is loved is real. And accessing that apocalyptic reality, again, apocalypse in the sense of what's the deepest truth that's always there. Accessing that apocalyptic reality is what he wants, I think, in these cantos. He's trying to get his poetics apocalyptic. He's trying to get to a poetic craft that is apocalyptic in scope, can get to the fact that love that he's lost, which has caused his world to seem so unreal, if he's able to turn his images and get to the bottom of their truth, not as a mere coping mechanism, but something that aligns with reality. Well, I should not feel it to be strange to find my love again, because in fact, what is real is that love. So the return of lost love is the return of what is, and that's what an apocalyptic poetics would show us. So if we put these two cantos together, I believe that Tennyson is asking for poetry that can deal with the prose of time, that can enter into the years of loss that he already foresees at this point, and be true to that. But to be able to do that, for poetry to be more than a pretty adornment or a way of being consoled merely, poetry has to go to the deepest level. And the fact is that what is true is the first love, the deep love. True love is the basis of all things. So when he imagines the return of his true love in Canto 14, the return of lost love is in fact the return of that which is, and that's what apocalypse shows. So what we need is an apocalyptic poetics that is grounded in that reality, a reality that encompasses the sad, strange days of time, the sad wastes that we must endure. And then we find that, in fact, consolation can bloom from those depths in a way that is not untrue, that is not false, something that is poetics of consolation that is authentic and which is there to serve the heart and to serve the heart's fidelity to the deepest love. And I think we do need this more than ever in this time of crisis, when so much is lost, so much is being lost. We have all lost hold of love. That was already the case before the crisis. The crisis shows this. Apocalypse reveals this. So we want an apocalyptic poetics that is able to grapple with this most subtle and most essential knowledge that love is what is, and because that is so, all shall be well somehow. I think that's all that we have time for today. Click like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.